because I did have dreams. I just didn't have plans. I'm my best asset, but I'm also like my worst enemy.
You might have just booked yourself live, a new client. Adam Badger, welcome into Forever Forward, man. Happy to have you on.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. It's my pleasure. I came across your Instagram page. Man, it must have been a couple months ago, and I followed you initially for your fitness content, which is tremendous. But I think there's so much more to you, than the fitness, than the nutrition, and so I'm excited to dive into all of it today. But I guess before we even begin, maybe you can help us to kind of walk through where you were 10 years ago today, because I know that it probably looked a little bit different than where you're sitting right now.
10 years ago was when I started my career as a personal trainer. 5 years before that, which is the post that you're referring to, basically I was unloading trucks for like $8 an hour.
Yeah.
And I was a good student in school. Like I got straight A's. Like I was always a good student. I never got in trouble. I didn't drink in high school. I didn't do drugs. I didn't smoke cigarettes. But I was also just very introverted. So I didn't have I never had like a core group of guy friends. I didn't go on any dates in high school. Like I didn't kiss a girl till I was out of high school. Like I wouldn't even say like I was a loser. And then maybe that sounds mean, but like I was just like there. I didn't really like leave a lasting impression.
It feels to me like maybe at the time you felt like purposeless, like you were just kind of drifting along.
So the funny part is that I didn't feel that way because I did have dreams. I just didn't have plans. So my entire childhood, all I wanted to do, my number one goal, and some people chuckle when I say this, but I just wanted to be a professional wrestler. That's all I wanted to do.
Like WWE or like Olympics?
No, like WWE.
Okay.
So like I would watch that my entire childhood. That was my number one goal. And I started working out at a young age because of that. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't do drugs and I didn't drink alcohol, because I didn't want to like get messed up and like go down that path. So it did keep me on the straight and narrow. And that's also why I didn't go to college, despite being like a good straight A student. Like I got really good grades. I could have got into, relatively any college I wanted, but I just didn't. I was like, no, I have this goal, but I had no plan of how to do it. So I ended up, training to become a professional wrestler, and I did it on the independents for years. But I had a lot of injuries. I kind of like lost the love for it, which was a whole other story of my life of just like dealing with that loss of purpose. Right. So, kind of like what a lot of like ex-athletes deal with when their sport goes away. So anyway, when I got out of high school, I just was like, I kind of romanticized the idea of pursuing this like kind of like the starving artist. Like I was pursuing this goal, which is a kind of a sport, kind of an art, and I was working out, but I really wasn't doing anything with my life. I was just working like dead end jobs.
Yeah.
So at the time, I was working, for $8 an hour. I was 19 years old. I was driving like at the time a 15, 16, 17-year-old Toyota that I had to like put my foot out of the car door to back out, right?
So it didn't have like a reverse gear?
Like it went into reverse, but the wheels just didn't go that way. I don't even know what the exact problem was, but like I didn't have like, and it cost me, I think I paid $500 for that.
Okay.
Right? So like, and I'm at work one day, and these two kids who were younger than me pull up in like a BMW.
Yeah.
And I knew them from high school, and we just got to talking, and they had mentioned how, I was like, what are you guys up to? They were both in college, so they were both working towards something, but they were also like dealing drugs, and not even like in like a sketchy, like they were just like two normal kids. They were just like, yeah, we're also dealing drugs, and they both came from families who had money, so it's not even though they needed the money.
Yeah,
so
right, right.
They had money, they had a car, they had good families, they were going to college, and they were also dealing drugs on the side. And I'm like, I didn't come from money, I didn't have any money, I didn't have any plan, and I was like, they're like, you could easily start doing this with us.
Yeah.
And I said no. And the moral of the story was that like it took me 5 years after that to find personal training as a career. It took me another 4 years after that to start my own business, and then another 6 years of having my own business to be in the place I am now, where is that, I'm married, have a nice house in the suburbs, I have two beautiful children. My wife was able to resign from teaching, and I make enough to support my family and invest towards our future. So that was the post that you're referring to. And when I said no to the quick money, I didn't know that this was good. Things were going to turn out this way.
Well,
And for many, many years, it seemed like it wasn't.
yeah, well, look, if I could just ask, because I'm curious, right? I mean, to you, who's clearly a good person who has morals, right? It seems insignificant to say no, right? That just is the morally right thing to do. But could you take us back? Like, in that moment, I think rationally, some people might think, look, that's actually a good choice. Make some quick money. It's a legitimate business. What was the really compelling factor to you that made you say, no, I don't want to go down this road. I want to take maybe the harder, more difficult path for me to, make something of myself that isn't that?
So I think, like, just like many real life stories, like there wasn't like this big dramatic moment where I had like this dilemma. It was a pretty easy, just I was like, oh no, like I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah.
But the that was the in the moment, it was that. But underneath that answer was, I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink alcohol. So like I I had reasons for that. I grew up in a house where there was drug addiction. I saw firsthand like how much that could impact a family.
Yeah.
And my dad was the one who had the addiction, and he's now been sober for almost 20 years.
Wow.
But he, which I'm very proud of him, but he didn't get sober until I was 17. So it was a big part of my childhood, was dealing with that and seeing the effects of that. And uh I also have two younger brothers, so setting that example wasn't an option. So it wasn't even like, oh, I'm gonna take the harder road. It was just like, this is just a non-option. It wasn't even like but like you said, or like I said in the story that I wrote, was I could have done that just to get myself out of that situation of unloading trucks and then figured something out. And maybe, you know what? Maybe I would have still ended up where I am.
Yeah, I think that's a fair
Know?
point, right? Like maybe
Yeah,
it would have worked out the way. And
yeah.
what I'm also curious about is like as you reflect on that time, you talk about moving trucks, and I'm sure it was difficult and laborious and hot. Like I'm sitting here in New York City, I got no AC in my place. It's like 110 degrees in here. I'm sure you had
Ooh.
days that were a whole lot worse. But look, as you look back, like were there any either mental frameworks or kind of like guidelines that you established during that period that helped kind of set you up for the future? Because look, when I was that age, I was doing kind of a similar thing, right? I was dropping off packages. I was kind of not sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I do look back on that time as a very formative experience. So, like, were there any kind of mental frameworks you developed that help you to become, I guess, who you are, or were those ingrained in you from an earlier age?
Um, I think I would, it's one of those things where when in the moment when I was in that stage, I was unhappy,
Yeah.
and I was like, I didn't, but I also didn't know like there was like an alternative. It was like I just was used to that lifestyle. Oh, you go to a job you don't like, and
Yeah.
you take what you can get. And again, I was 19, so like at 19 you're not going to have like a fucking great job anyway, right?
Totally.
Unless you have an awesome opportunity. And I think that everyone should work jobs like that, because I think it builds character. As far as like mental frameworks, I think it's something that, like, being reflective on it, I can kind of see it was just this underlying, just this discipline of, okay, I've got to go to work, I've got to make money, so this is the job I have available, and I always just like would go on to the next job.
With the assumption that
But
there needs to be a job, it's got to be
then
something.
I've got to have something. And I think for me at the time, as far as like frameworks to kind of like stay on the right path, I did have, whether it was a pipe dream or not, I did have a goal that didn't have to do with money, that I was very passionate about, that kept me on the straight and narrow, that I didn't want to mess up. And I took a lot of pride in my identity,
Yeah.
which I identified as someone who did, and I'm not a perfect person by any means, but like who did the right thing and who didn't make those choices. So for many, many years, I mean, I didn't have drinks until I was like 27.
Wow. Good for you.
So so for many years, that was my identity. Like I would go to clubs, I would go to parties, I would go to bachelor parties. Like once I got like into my 20s, I made friends and all stuff. Like I had a more active life. I would still go out, and I never got peer pressured into doing anything. And I almost took that as like a challenge, like, oh, you're not going to make me do something I don't want to do. And then that became my identity. But because I was so chill about it and so confident in that choice, no one ever gave me crap. And I actually was always, again, as I got older, was someone who could hang with everyone and would stay out just as late as everyone.
Yeah.
But but I like, uh, just wouldn't drink,
Well,
and no one would care.
it's funny you say that. I had an individual, Johnny Berry, on the podcast a few weeks ago. He started a clothing brand called Always Sober Clothing. And the message behind
Nice.
it is his own journey of never drinking. And he's in his mid-20s and he's never drank before. And it's funny how you said you almost took it, you felt a lot of pride in who you were and almost as a challenge. Like, you guys can try and get me to do this, but I'm not going to. He said that
Yeah.
he almost got addicted to that feeling. Like, no matter what you do, you are not going to get me to try this. And it's funny how that seems to be a similar feeling that you felt.
It was, yeah, it was 100%, because I think because it's so, and he probably felt the same way, is because it's so out of the norm.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as out of the norm now. I meet way more people now who don't drink, but back then, I mean, like I said, it was 15 years ago. Meeting a 20-year-old who didn't ever drink, and not even like, oh, I'm just not drinking tonight. It's like, no, I've literally never been drunk, or like I tried drinking, but like I just had never done it.
Yes.
And it was very out of the ordinary. And me coming from where I grew up and how I grew up, I think I always had this weird dichotomy of having this inner belief that I was special or unique, or that there was something about me, but never feeling like anyone else saw it.
Interesting.
That when I found something that made me stand out, I kind of latched onto it. And luckily it was something positive.
Because it could have been something quite negative, right? And
Totally.
Yeah.
It could have been something negative. And I tend to be someone who has a little bit of like an addictive personality in terms of like, if I get like hooked on something, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do this a lot. So like, and usually those are always positive things, like working out or like I started cold plunging. Like I like those things. But I latched onto something that made me stand out. And then when I noticed, at first, when I would tell people I didn't drink, I was insecure about it, and then I would be like shy about it. And then once I stopped giving a crap about that and was just like, no, I don't do it, and I was so calm about it, it actually like made people feel more comfortable around me, because I was being so authentic. It made me, I think, made me more like attractive to girls.
Totally.
They were like, oh, this guy's not gonna get drunk and just like make stupid decisions. Like I can count on him, sort of thing. Like I've had people tell me that before, like, oh, I love when you're out with us because we know everyone's getting home safe because Adam's here. Yeah. And then once I started like working out, lifting weights, and I was also strong, they're like, oh, and also like, if anyone messes with us.
And you're also jacked.
Yeah, I mean, so like,
for those watching on YouTube right now, Adam's biceps are like bigger than my thighs. So,
no, I'm not, I think it's just the camera angle.
Well, look, it's funny. And like, what I will say on the women point is like, I don't really talk about, women on this podcast. And I have a girlfriend, soon to be, fingers crossed, my fiance. She's just so wonderful. But what I will say is that, like, generally, I think women find it very attractive when men are, authentic is probably not the right word, but just confident in their convictions. Like, this is who they are, and they're not going to change. And I think it makes people feel very comfortable around them, because it's like, oh, I know what I'm going to get every time with this guy. Like, I don't have to wonder if he's going to be a chameleon around different people. It's like, oh, and it's almost, because I think fundamentally people don't like change. People hate, having to guess what people are going to be like. And so if they know that this is the same Adam they're getting every time, it's almost like a comfort blanket for them. And I think that's very attractive. I really do.
I think, well, it's also a source of safety, because we as humans were wired to seek safety and consistency and routine and comfort. So if you have someone who is, their personality changes based on what room they're in, it's not like you feel like you're in danger, but it's just a feeling of you just feel unsettled around that. And I think for me, and it goes both ways too. I'm sure that men find women attractive who are just more authentic and they're being themselves. Like, I think that it's just, and it's not even like a sexual thing too. It's like other people who if you're applying for jobs or you're someone like me who like gets clients, like being as authentic as possible is going to make you more attractive to people because they don't feel like they're, you know, getting something pulled over on them,
Yeah,
right?
I think at the end of the day, people have a deep desire to want to be themselves. And some people
Yeah,
maybe are scared to do it because they're afraid of the pressure or not being socially accepted. But I think when they're around people that are themselves, it makes them more comfortable to let their guard down. And it
yeah.
like, and, go ahead,
Go ahead.
please.
Oh no, I was gonna say I when after that job that I was telling you about, I had another job that I didn't love, which was I was working at Subway, like the sandwich shop, right? That was my next dead end job. But I remember they had like a calendar in the back room, obviously, and it was one of those calendars that just had the quotes on every page.
Okay.
And I saw a quote, and it stuck with me for all these years, and it was something that it was like I had it resonated with me because I was in such a crappy place, but like I was very not even confident. I just had this unfounded belief of just like, no, like I'm gonna be something.
Yeah,
And the quote was, "It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are."
I love
And
that. I've never heard that.
that's yeah, and I don't even remember who the quote was by, but it stuck with, and I wish I could take credit for it, but I didn't write that quote. But it stuck with me all these years, and anytime I've felt myself veering away from who I am as a person, it's never yielded like overall positive results in any area.
Yeah.
And every time I just come back to, you know, who I am, I feel like things are just flowing better.
I
But you get pulled off track because like if at your root you're not confident, because I think at my root I think I'm confident, but I'm very I I lack a lot of natural self-worth. I have to work to build my self-worth. So for me, I question myself a lot. But whenever I pull myself back to center and do the things that I know that I love to do and show up the way I want to show up, things just seem to flow better.
Well, I wonder if you're like me. Like I want to believe that I'm great, but on that same token, I'm also my own biggest critic. Are you
Mhm.
similar, or are you no?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I
Yeah.
think I have this weird dichotomy of like, I'm my best asset, but I'm also like my worst enemy too.
Love that.
Cause like, yeah. And I would say it's probably a 70-30 split between when 70% I'm being my own worst enemy and 30% I'm being my biggest asset or my
Yeah.
biggest cheerleader, and I have to pull myself into that 30%. I have to actively like get myself in the frame of mind to be that 30% because 70% of me at all times is just like focusing on and again, this is just me being honest, is like I was telling you today when we were texting, like I don't have it all figured out, but I've figured out strategies to reroute myself on a regular basis to keep myself in that frame of mind of like, no, like you got this, like you're gonna figure this out.
Well, it's funny because from the outside looking in, I would assume you would just be content. You're successful. You have your own business, right? You've got a
Yeah.
family, and you seem like you've got it made. But internally, I find that a lot of the successful people that I know are their own biggest critics, and they're never satisfied. And I go back and forth on whether or not I think that's a good thing or not. I think it's a good thing.
I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think
So
I
why?
disagree. Yeah. I don't think it's a good thing because I think I think the sooner you realize that void is never going to be filled by anything outside of you, the better off you'll be.
Yeah.
And for me, luckily, I'm figuring that out in my early 30s. But I have some clients who are like, I like a handful of clients who are millionaires. Like they're doing very well, and they are CEOs or CFOs, or they own their own like law practices, and like they're further ahead in life. They're 15, 20, 30 years older than me, and I've had these conversations with them where like they're looking to me for like fitness advice, and I'm coaching them up on life. I'm coaching them
Yeah.
up on
Yeah.
on shit. But they also give me tips too because they are further along. And the biggest overwhelming thing is just like the success doesn't fix anything.
It's so
It
interesting.
literally doesn't fix anything.
Because you're somebody who's probably had more exposure to successful people, quote unquote, highly successful people than a lot of
Yeah.
folks. I mean, you work directly with them, probably trying to improve them in where they feel they are weakest. And maybe that's a good segue into your business. So, like, let's talk about that. So, if you could just walk me through how you found this passion of yours and how it started and maybe where it is now, and we can go from there.
Yeah. So I started working out when I was like 12.
Okay.
And it was because I went from being like the skinny kid to the fat kid over the course of like a year. I was like this kid who just like, I was just a normal kid and I didn't ever think about food in the terms of like, oh, should I, shouldn't I? I just ate what I want. I ate Fruity Pebbles, I ate McDonald's, like I just ate whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Then we moved from, because I used to live in Queens, New York. And then we moved from Queens, New York to Long Island, New York. And when we moved, I you go from like walking everywhere to now you're not walking everywhere. Uh, my diet habits didn't change, but I think I was eating more due to being nervous about starting a new school and stuff like that. And then going into middle school, all of a sudden I was like the chubby kid, and
Yeah.
I didn't know how that happened.
Yeah.
And and it really affected me. I've had body dysmorphia since I was probably 11 years old because of that. And then I figured out that if I just ate better, could lose weight. And I lost like 25 pounds when I was like 12 years old. But which sounds like a win, but realistically, I didn't learn any like habits from it. I just learned eat less and exercise. So it took me a lot of years to undo that wiring of like, oh, just eat as little as possible and or work out as much as possible. So again, I work and consistently worked out all the way up until, now, but around age 23, I was on my like fifth dead end job that I hated. And, I was like, I really like, I feel like personal training would be a cool job to have. That's literally what it was. It wasn't like I had this like deep desire to help people or to coach people on their mindsets. I didn't know any of that stuff was going to happen. I just was like, this would be a cool job to have. I could be in the gym all day and I could probably, be good at it. So I got a job as a personal trainer, got certified. I started working and then, I found something. It was one of the first things in my life that I realized that if I was putting in effort, I was getting a return on.
Yeah.
And then within like a couple of years, within like a few months, I was like fully booked. But then like within like 2 years, I was like running the training department of 5 gyms that I worked for. And then I left that place to go to a private studio, and then that didn't work out great. And then all of a sudden, I got laid off. So I went from like a full calendar of clients, switched companies. Within 6 months, I didn't have a job.
What a whirlwind. I mean, that must have been a wild time for you. It also seems to me like you took on more responsibility fairly quickly. Like once you identified that this was kind of your thing, it feels like you grew it in a decent speed.
Well, so that was working for a big box gym. And when you're working for a big box gym, especially the one I was working for, it's a great place to start, but you can't make a career there long term. Because like within like 2 years, I was making, whatever, like I think I was making $50,000 a year, but I was like capped out. Like there was nowhere to go from there. So I knew that I couldn't be there forever, but it was also the first time I actually had a job that I liked.
Right.
So I didn't want to leave. I had like literally the best man and the groomsmen in my wedding were all friends who were trainers at that gym that I met there. Right. So like, it was the first time I had a core group of male friends. I had a job that I liked. I was making decent money for a 25, 26-year-old
Absolutely.
guy. So and I lived way below my means. So I was like, this is fucking great. And then but I knew that I had to leave. So eventually I left. I went to work for this other, which was a private studio. I didn't do my due diligence on that. I also at the time wasn't ready for the responsibility that I had. Like at the time I thought I was the shit, but like looking back now, I wasn't. So, within 6 months, like the guy was just like, he was basically just like, I can't afford to pay you 50 grand a year, anymore. Do you want to drop down to like part-time? I was like, not really. So
right.
I didn't have a job. So when I started my business, it was again, like, it's always like looking back when I'm telling these stories, if I knew how things were going to turn out, I wouldn't have been as high strung and anxious about it. But like at the time I was like, I was living with, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And so I'm with this girl who's like gorgeous. She has a career as a teacher. She's like awesome. And I just want to give her the best life. And I get fucking laid off. And I don't know. And literally the only options I had were other training jobs where I would probably be making similar or less money.
Right.
So I was like, all right, I guess I'm gonna just I literally was just like, I'm gonna start doing my own thing just to earn again, I gotta have a job. So I gotta earn some money
Yep.
for the time being. So
Right.
my business started by emailing a CrossFit gym and just being like, would you consider letting me pay you rent to train clients out of your gym? And they were super, it was a shot in the dark. They were super cool. They charged me a ridiculously low fee to train people there.
Okay.
So I was essentially making like all profit. So I went from making, 50% of the sessions I was coaching to now 100% of the sessions I was coaching. Granted, I was charging a little less, but it's still, I was making more.
Yep.
And it was all, at the time, it was all cash. So I was like, oh, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess if I may, like going from kind of being structured, being at what you said, a big box gym, to now being on your own, right? Was there anxiety in that, in the sense that you no longer have the structure of a corporation behind you, or no? Was it actually freeing, being that you were kind of driving the car here?
Probably 99% anxiety.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's just because, again, my relationship with money growing up, watching people financially struggle,
Yeah.
I had it hardwired into my brain that money was hard to make and money was scary.
Yeah.
And that, I never saw anyone just being like steady and stable. If I had the mindset I have now back then, I probably wouldn't have been as anxious if I know
Yeah.
what I knew now. But again, it was just a lack of skills. I just didn't have the skills. I didn't know how to create a website. I didn't know how to market. I just literally I just messaged people that I used to train. It was like, hey, I'm training here now. Do you want to come in for a session?
Yeah.
And a couple people came. It was enough to start making some money. And then my client, who's a CEO of a bank, I had done one session with him, right? And it was the day I got fired.
You're kidding.
And
Okay.
he texted me like 3 hours after our session to set up his next session. And I almost didn't text him back. But I had been going under the umbrella of the place that I worked for. I had gone to his place of work and run some group workouts, and his employees liked me. And they were under contract with this other place for a few more weeks. And I just messaged him. I said, hey, listen, unfortunately I got fired today, but I just want to let you know, it was awesome to work with you. It was awesome to work with your employees. Hopefully our paths will cross again, but I don't really know what the next move is.
Okay.
And he texted me back, and basically it was like, they asked the employees and they really liked you. Like, would you want to coach boot camps at our place instead of through the business, and when our contract is up with them? So when I got that contract, that gave me like, at the time it was like $300 a week that I was making through that. But I was like, okay, that's something.
That's absolutely a start.
Steady income, and then I was making some cash coaching people one-on-one. And that guy is still a personal training client of mine. I still run those boot camps at that place 6 years later. And he trains me 5 days a week in my garage gym. And again, like I had this conversation on another podcast recently. Like, people just drastically underestimate the power of just showing up authentically as yourself and doing a good job. Like, he could have easily texted me back and be like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. And that could have been the end of it.
Yeah.
But because we had a good rapport and I treated him like like a normal person, I wasn't kissing his ass because he was the CEO, and I still don't.
Right.
He could see that I wasn't trying to get something out of it. I was just being authentic and be like, hey, this is what happened, but I had done a good job. So anyway, none of this answered your question, but like your question of like what my business is now, it's kind of evolved into a bit more of, once clients are in the door, it's very much lifestyle and mindset coaching, more so than it is the nuts and bolts of nutrition and training. Like, I'm helping people work through their self-sabotage tendencies, their self-limiting beliefs, telling them stories like this of my experience and the things that I've gone through, and helping them overcome, emotional eating. I've worked with clients through divorces, them changing careers, like big changes in their life, and kind of help them stay on the straight and narrow. And the reason why I use fitness and nutrition as a vehicle for that is because I believe that those are two things that we can almost always control, is the food we put in our mouth and whether or not we like move our body every day. And I think that I genuinely believe that every positive thing in my life breadcrumbs back to consistency with working out, fitness.
Yeah.
Everything. I met my wife at the gym that I was coaching at. I've developed confidence, discipline, work ethic, like patience, consistency through just showing up and working out and eating the foods and saying no to certain foods and doing that over and over and over again. It rewires your brain to, oh, like dude, I tell this conversation with people all the time. Like, having your own business requires more self-discipline than working for someone else. People think that owning your business is more freedom. It's more self-discipline. The more freedom you have, the more disciplined you have to be. Because I don't have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I could cancel I don't have the boss telling me to do that.
Right.
But I do it. I don't have to sit on a podcast at 7 o'clock at night, but I do it because I'm just constantly planting those seeds and watering those seeds and doing it over and over again. And I don't believe I would have been able to do that if I didn't unload those trucks, if I didn't work out every day, and if I didn't do all those things. And some days none of this is at the front of my mind, that I'm just dealing with the day-to-day stressors of being a dad and being a provider and getting through the day. But when I have conversations like this, it's therapeutic for me to like kind of unload that and be like, this is what I fucking help people do. It's not like one of my clients who's the guy who's the CEO. He's told me on so many occasions, he's like, basically like, it was like a, I don't know what the word would be, but him, when he started training with me and started prioritizing his health and fitness, it was like, there was like his life, it was like his life before that and his life after that.
Really?
But when he started training with me, he was already a CEO. So it was like, he could have easily been like, I'm successful. I've got money. I've got a wife. I've got a son. My life is good. I've got a good network of people. Why do I need to fucking wake up and work out 5 days a week?
Right.
But now he's just like, I've seen him through, and he's just one of many, but like I've seen him through so many personal ups and downs and really stressful situations of life. And he's told me on several occasions, like, if I didn't have the anchor of showing up and working out every day with you, he's like, I would be drinking too much alcohol. I would have gained 20 pounds and I would just be in a worse mental place.
I think
so like
it's two things like that I think are really interesting about what you've been saying. The first is, it's so clear to me that like for the longest time, I thought that my self-worth should be somewhat tied to my net worth. Meaning, like, if I'm rich, I should love myself. I will be happy when that comes. And I certainly don't have a whole lot of money, but I'm learning that, like, as I get older and start to make a little bit more, my baseline happiness is not changing. And so clearly, those two things are not as related as I thought they were. And secondly, you know, one thing that I appreciate about what you said about working out is that, you know, it's a discipline thing, right? It's a consistency thing. For me, as somebody who has struggled with anxiety my whole life, right? It's been an uphill battle for me. You know, and I am somebody who has a disciplined fitness routine. For me, it's like, it's more than the gains. It's more than the aesthetics. Fitness for me has become an anchor that, like, I know that I'm going to be nervous about being able to control if I get fired or how much money I make or whatever happens during the day. But I do know that I can show up every day and get a 30-minute workout in. Like, and I think people underestimate the power of making that choice and knowing that, like, in a world where you can't control everything, you actually can control this. And so it almost feels like, to me, fitness has become, you know, so much more than just about the gains. And it feels like to you, like you're almost using fitness and nutrition as a vessel to coach people about like life itself.
Oh, 100%. I mean, literally, if you want to, like, when you're working out, what you're doing is you're putting controlled temporary stress on your body, and then your body recovers from it.
Yep.
And if you do that 2,000 times, what you basically do is you rewire the structure, you rewire the cells in your body to understand that when there is stress, we can recover.
Yes.
And that's literally what working on is. And then if you get to the next level, it's like, oh, and also I've kept all these promises to myself. So when you start a podcast and you go, I'm going to record 2 podcasts a week, you don't have doubt that you can keep that promise to yourself, because you kept the promise to yourself that I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week for the last however many years.
Yes.
So, but the thing is, though, is the reason, but like, for example, most people show up to their office job every single day. So you could be like, well, I show up to my office job every single day. I pay my bills on time.
Yes.
So like, I'm keeping those promises to myself, but you're not. You're keeping those promises to other people. to the people, to the bank, to
To your boss, to
to your
everybody.
boss, to National Grid, right? So working out and your nutrition are like two of the only things that you can do with absolutely no account. Like no one is going to, unless you hire a coach, like no one's holding you accountable to those things.
Right.
So once you can do them, like one of my favorite things is literally just work out in my garage by myself with headphones on, and I'm like elated to be there, right? And that's not to say that I am always motivated or I always feel like it, but once I'm in it, I have like a like sort of like a spiritual connection with that process,
Right.
and um, so it's so much more than just. Again, for me, I'm not a science guy. Like I didn't go to college for this. I didn't dream about becoming. So like I have a much more. I hate to use the whole word holistic, but kind of like a holistic approach to the process. Because like this can evoke so much more out of you than just losing weight or looking more toned or whatever
Well,
that goal
so I
is.
think this begs the question because there's clearly so many benefits to it. There's no downsides, right, to becoming fit, eating right. But I know that, speaking from an individual standpoint, I do sometimes have issues getting myself to go. And especially in the beginning when I wanted to make this my life, it was very difficult for me to form a routine around this. Like for something that is so positive for people, what do you believe are some of the barriers to folks, actually diving into this way of life?
I think there are a lot. You could like if you want to talk about ones that are maybe like outside of your mindset. It's like I don't think most of our environments are set up to support it, right?
Yep.
Like most people are working, 8 to 10 hours a day. They're commuting. They've got kids. There's at the tap of a button you can get food delivered to your house. There's a lack of education around it, and when you're growing up, like no one's teaching you how to do this stuff. So there's that. I don't think most people's environments are set up for it. And then I also think that you eat every day. You move every day. Even if you're not exercising, you move and you eat. That's what human beings do. So there's this almost like this sense of people think that they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's like like I'll figure it out eventually. Like I eat every day. I like it's this subconscious belief like it'll get figured out.
Yeah.
Another barrier is there is a big misleading belief that there's like fit people and there's like regular people. So what happens is you just go, it gives you a cop out. It's like, well, I'm not really a
Yeah.
fitness
I'm
person.
not
That's
one of
not my
those
thing.
people.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people. But it's like, no, this is just something that everyone should do. It should be. That's like being like, I'm not really like a toothbrush person. I don't really like to brush my teeth, right? It's like, no,
Yeah.
everyone brushes their teeth. So it should just become some. I would love to see fitness become just a very basic form of self care. It's like brushing your teeth or taking a shower. So I think those are the main barriers. Is like we build it up too much in our head about what is required. People think that they have to like be obsessed with it or they have to have a perfect diet. And realistically, all you need to do is like find something that you enjoy that gets your body moving, and then try to eat some more protein at each meal. Try to be more conscious of what you're putting in your body. And really, if you're starting there, like you're going to be fine. That's going to get you, 70%
Well,
of the way there.
that's like such a relief to hear, right? Because I've seen and I've listened to a lot of podcasts with dietitians and nutritionists, and it's like, look, you got to eat this or that, and if you don't,
Yeah.
you fail. What I love about your approach is it seems like very practical and pragmatic. Like, look, you don't have to uproot your whole life, right? Like, we can find a happy medium here. Could you talk a bit about like, some of the ways that you think people can make simple changes, or the ways that you can start eating a little bit better that doesn't actually change everything for you?
Yeah. I think the big one, a couple big ones. One of them is like, there's, is to stop with the snacking. Like, um, focus your day around meals. And again, old school, basic breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like that's it. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Start there. It doesn't have to be eating every 2 hours or eating at a Tupperware. It's like, what am I having for breakfast, lunch, and dinner today?
Yep.
Start there. And then when you're building those meals, try to build them around a source of protein and a source of produce as like your two main staples there. So if you're like, what am I having for breakfast? What is my protein? What is my source of produce? And that could be something simple. It could be eggs and fruit. And then
Yeah.
you can fill in like some carbs in there too. It's when you're building a lunch. What is my protein? What is my produce? Dinner. What is my protein? What is my produce? And just ask yourself that question. It's going to get you thinking about food differently. Because most people, when they think about food, what's the first question they ask themselves is, what do I feel like?
That's the first question I
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
myself. I'm
yeah.
gonna be
Like
honest.
what do I feel like
What
eating
am I
right
in the
now?
mood for?
Yeah, what am I in the mood for? And there's a time and a place for that. But realistically, if you start thinking about like in terms of these are my, I like to get people to stop thinking about what they need to cut out of their diet and start thinking about what they need to add to their diet. So these are my requirements, right? And so it's like when you get into your car to go on a road trip, right? If you were going to drive from New York City to Florida, you'd be like, well, let me make sure my tires have air, maybe make sure my oil's changed and I got a full tank of gas. Like you're at least going to make sure those things are intact. So
Absolutely.
so when you're building a plate, what's my lean protein? What is my produce? What is my carb source? And if you're doing that, again, if you're eating 3 meals a day, that means you're eating 21 times a week. So if 2 or 3 of those meals each week are what am I in the mood for, you're gonna be fine. But you don't. But so like for me on a Saturday night, I'm going. What am I in the mood for?
Right.
But the other 20, 7 meals I eat that week are this is this is just what I eat. This is my routine. I know what I am going to eat for breakfast. I know what I'm going to eat for lunch. I know what my usual dinner options are. And I've gotten to a place now where if my wife, if I get home, if I get done with work and my wife's like, I want to go get ice cream, I'll go get ice cream.
Yeah. Right. And if
But
you
go
know,
ahead.
go ahead, please.
I was going to say years ago, I wouldn't have done it though. Years ago, I would have had anxiety around that. I would have been like, oh, it's a Tuesday. I can't be eating ice cream on a Tuesday. I'm going to blow the whole, like, and that, because again, when clients tell me about this stuff, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like, I've
You're
had
like,
all
no,
those
I've been
experiences.
there.
I've been there.
Yeah.
And now that I'm more, the stress you're putting on your body, freaking out about that stuff. And that's another barrier too, is that all or nothing. People think once they have the ice cream, now I've blown it. But if you can start to, once you have those basics down of the meals, then we can start talking about total calories. Like you're in finance, right? Like
Yes.
when you're talking about budgeting for people, like what are some things you need to know? Well, I need to know how much money you make and what are your expenses,
Right.
right? So when you're thinking about your calories, if you know, well, what your calorie budget is, then you start to realize, oh, well, if a slice of pizza is, let's say, 400 calories, that doesn't mean that this has ruined my day. I just got to take 400 calories out somewhere else
Exactly.
to afford this pizza.
But and you, what I love is that you don't make dieting seem scary or daunting. Like
Yeah,
to me, it
yeah,
seems like I can't climb that mountain, but it's actually like no, you actually can, and it's not even, maybe it's not even a mountain.
it's not. It's honestly just a bunch of small little decisions, and once you start making them and not overthinking them, then it just flow and it becomes habit, right? So to give you an example, like not to like take up your entire night, but like you know for me, I have a, and I almost hate telling the story because I feel like the more I tell it, like I've hardwired into my brain, but I've worked really hard on doing it. But for me, I've always had a lot of anxiety around money, a
Well,
lot of anxiety around money.
me too.
So for me, doing an actual budget, like I'm like my stomach's in knots.
Yeah.
Or just looking at like if I get when I pay my mortgage, I would be like, oh, like oh, like, right. But I just saw how much stress money could cause when I was growing up, and it caused me a lot of anxiety. So like when anything money related would cause me anxiety. So I get when people say that about food because I'm like, yeah, I understand that. I have that same relationship. I've had that same relationship with money. So I know some strategies to help you work around that. And a lot of it just comes down to getting out of your emotional brain and getting into your logical brain. And if you can get into that, and when you're having those moments of anxiety around food, like, oh my God, my, I could just, my wife's a saint for dealing with it, but there's been so many times where like, I'm looking at this like dream girl of mine who's like, just wants to like go get ice cream with me. And all I'm thinking about is
Yeah.
how this is messing up my diet. Am I a fraud? All this stuff is coming up. All this anxiety around is coming up. And I'm like, there's just this really beautiful girl that wants to have an ice cream go to. Just go fucking have the ice cream. Right. Right. So like,
Yeah.
but for a lot of people, they're not, they're relying on comfort and convenience when it comes to food. So they're grabbing that ice cream because they had a stressful day. They're grabbing the Doritos because they had a stressful day, or because they're trying to numb certain emotions. So when you're having those anxious feelings, just pull your logical brain back to like, okay, I have a certain calorie budget. This is about 200 calories. it's really illogical to think that this one food choice is going to really ruin anything. But that's
Right.
my emotional brain, right? And a lot of people, they have that emotional part of the brain, like we talked about from the beginning. People seek safety. So it's on people don't like this is the major thing is like people don't know where new habits will get them, but they know where their current habits will get them. So they'd rather stay in the safety of their current habits than the
Right.
unpredictability of the new habits, even though they know inherently that the new habits would probably lead to a better result. They just aren't sure.
Because
So
it's
I have,
scary, it's change, it's
yeah,
uncertainty, right? It's chaos, it's
yeah.
all of those things, and they don't want to take the leap because it's safer to stay where they're at.
Do you know how many people I've worked with who will, are, drinking a ton of alcohol, they're eating out all the time, they're admittedly emotionally like, overindulging on food. But then if I tell them to eat more fruit and more protein, they're hesitant to do it.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's like, oh yeah, but they understand the logic behind it. They're like, but this is just really scary to me. And I always have the conversation with them. I'm like, why is it scary? Well, what if I eat more potato. You're telling me to eat more potatoes, or you're telling me to eat 1,700 calories. I think I should eat 1,100. I go, yeah, but you weren't eating 1,100. You were
Yeah,
eating 3,000.
exactly.
But you're thinking about those 4 times that you dieted that you ate 1,100.
Right.
Yeah. So it's little things like that. It's pulling yourself back to that logical frame, that present logical state of mind, and getting out of the emotional part of your brain, which again
Yeah.
is daily work. It doesn't go away.
Yeah. Well, it's so clear that first of all, just for those listening, how many individuals have you actually worked with? Like, if you had to ballpark it, what's the number?
I hate I it sounds exaggerated, but it's gotta be. I mean, well over 500 at this point. I mean, I've probably worked with you know two close to 200 people since I started like really really like honing into my online business in the end of 2021. So for like the end of 2021 to now, so the past like 2.5 years has been like close to 200 people. So that's not counting the 7.5 years before that of full-time in-person training. So like a lot of people.
Well,
It would be probably in that close to 1,000.
well, I think you have probably had more experience with this type of work than 99% of people, and probably more than most trainers, candidly. And my question for you is, maybe something we can close on is, out of all the individuals you've worked with and all the lessons you've learned about yourself and others, what has been the most rewarding thing about this journey that you've gone on? Have there been any truths you've uncovered or any stories you'd like to share about something that made you say, man, like this makes it all worth it?
Yeah. I, I mean, I've seen like, clients go from unsure if they could have kids to having kids because they
Wow.
lost weight and got healthier. I've seen people who were, relatively lonely and then they got the confidence, they met someone and they're married and have kids. Like I've seen people, lose 40, 50, 80 pounds and confront a lot of these self-limiting beliefs. So it's and to be honest with you, I'm the first person who like doesn't acknowledge that enough. Like because I'm just again I get very caught in the day to day of it. But I will say, and this might sound you know I don't know if it sounds selfish, but I think the most rewarding part of it is the fact that I can every day know that I'm doing like a good service for people. So when I even on like when I'm having stressful days or I get frustrated, like everyone else does, um, I just have this inner knowledge of like, yeah, but like your day is spent like genuinely trying to help people, and it's something that you are proud of doing. And when my kids are older and they're like asking what I do for a living, like I don't like go oh, well, I do this job. It's not like that, like, it's not like I explain the job with like this, like I got to do this thing every day.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the most rewarding thing is that I get to provide for my family and genuinely helping people.
Yeah. And I I m- I'll be vulnerable here. I greatly envy the passion that you have for your work. Part of this podcast that we're on is me trying to find that for myself. So you
Yeah,
inspire me, and your story inspires me, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and having the conversation. I really do appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.
thank you, man. And if I was to, again, if I was to give you like, unsolicited advice,
Please do.
it's I think that I didn't have a there's some days that I don't feel like I have a passion for it. I'm just like
Yeah.
I'm just doing the day to day things. Um, I was telling you this thing too, and I think it's helpful for people to understand like two things can be true at the same time. Like you can be pursuing something more, but also still be where your feet are and like be grateful for the things that you have now. And I'm sure that like if you're someone out there who's like you're working your career and you're trying to find like uh a passion project that you'll hopefully like turn into a full-time income, or you're trying to lose weight and change your habits and it's frustrating, try not to pursue it out of hatred for what you have now,
Mm,
because that just creates, and I've just been there so many times, it just creates this bad relationship with the process because it's fueled by negativity. And I've been fueled by a chip on my shoulder for 15, 20 years. And it only gets you so far to where you're like burning down things that actually make you happy, trying to find something that makes you happy. And
I've never been given that advice. That might be some of the best advice I've ever been given.
because everyone's going to tell you to grind it out and do this and work the late nights. And yeah, there's times you're going to have to do that. But like, I've really learned, man, like, we went way over time, but like, there was like a point, it was a point recently, like, 2 years ago, where I had the best income year of my career, and I was the most stressed, the most unhappy. I had probably gained like 12 pounds of unwanted weight and was waking up with severe anxiety every day, to the point where I was literally like driving in my car, like having panic attacks multiple times a week. And it was like, what's what, like, but again, it's because I was so fueled by trying to get to something that I thought was going to make me happy. And then I was like, I'm not fucking happy. Like I'm not, and
Yeah.
like I'm not working out the way I want to. I don't feel the way I want to. I'm not sleeping the way I want to. And when I started working on those things, like now, dude, like I'm telling you, like it's stuff that I really believe in, dude. It's like don't burn down things that actually make you happy, trying to find something that's going to make you happy. And the things that actually make you happy are going to honestly have nothing to do with like the work that you do. It's like the work that you do should be fun and passionate, but like your girlfriend, and when you eventually have kids, like a lot of guys, men especially, will really take that shit for granted, trying to be great at something.
Yeah.
And athletes do it, actors do it, all these people, and then we praise them, we put them up on this pedestal, like, oh yeah, you won all these championships, you're a multimillionaire, and no one pays attention to the fact that they're on their fourth marriage and they never see their kids.
I see
And
it a
for
lot, and I'm gonna be honest. I see it a lot in the industry I work in. Right, I work in
I
finance. It's
yeah,
a very demanding, both in hours and in stress and brain time. And at first, I thought it was really cool when I first joined. Right, like man, these
yeah,
guys make all this money. And you realize like a lot of them don't have families. A lot of them are divorced. And it's like
yeah.
you bring up a really good point that like you can't destroy your life trying
Yeah,
to find the thing that you're quote unquote supposed to do.
yeah, yeah, and 100%, man. And like, and to be honest, you can choose how you approach. It comes back to the confidence thing. Like, you can look at the way that other people in your field do things, and you have the power to go, well, I'm not going to do them that way,
You're right.
and stick by that. Like me with the no drinking, and stick by that, and again, but I think if you what's going to happen though is if you put too much pressure on like, oh, this thing is going to get me out of this thing that I hate, it's going to cause resentment for the thing that you like, because whereas every week or month that goes by that it didn't pull you out of the thing, you're going to be like, why am I fucking putting all this effort into you, like, it's going to cause a resentment. So you want it to come from a place of, and I can tell you genuinely love it, but it's like, just from a place of love, like just from that place, not from, again, the story we tell ourselves, like, I hate this, and I'm sorry for coaching you on this, but like, as like, I worked this career and I'm miserable here, and this is gonna pull me out of it. If you keep telling yourself that story, that will become your story, and you will latch onto that story. And what happens is like it's just gonna make 75% of your life stressful and negative, because that's where you're spending most time. But if you can find positives in the day to day that you're doing, and be like, oh well, like this provides me the income that I can pursue this other thing. Because if I was still unloading trucks or delivering packages, I wouldn't
Right.
have free time to do this shit, or I would have interesting stories to tell. And again, it took me a while to get to that place, and a lot of deep work, a lot of cold plunges, a lot of meditation, a lot of crying, a lot of therapy,
Yeah,
for
right.
me to finally be like, what actually makes me fucking happy? And for me, whenever someone asks me, why do you want your businesses to be successful? Why do you want, like, I was always like jealous of other people, like, oh, they're writing these articles, they've got all these Zoom calls booked, they're speaking on stages, and I would want to do it, and I'll get so fucking like riled up, like, oh, I just want to do those things. And at the core of it, like, I don't actually want to do any of that stuff. I wanted it because I wanted the approval of other people. But when a therapist sat there and asked me, like, well, why do you want to make more money? Like, if you tripled your income tomorrow, what would you want to do more of? And I was like, I would want to relax more. I would want to spend more time with my kids. I would want to go on date nights with my wife. And she's like, yeah, so start doing that now.
Yeah.
Like, because you don't actually want to be sitting behind the computer all day. I was like, no, I fucking hate sitting behind the computer. But I was just doing it because I thought that's what I had to do to achieve this to grab onto this goalpost that I thought was going to bring me some sort of external validation. And then once I like started really doing the deep work of validating myself and loving myself and focusing on things that I like, and there's times where, like, I still fuck up and still fall back into that again, that addictive personality, and I work. But anyway, man, I don't know, that just popped into my brain because I can tell that you're really passionate about this, and I think that the more when you're first starting something, negativity is like a good fuel because it'll get you going.
Yep.
But like after a while, then that negative fuel source has all the power, and that just becomes who you are. You're just like this person who's like, man, I fucking hate this thing in my life, and I'm trying to change it, and then it becomes your story. And then what's going to happen is when that thing goes away and the podcast is full time, you're going to put another thing in that place.
Yeah. And
Because
I have two things to say on this. First, you said, not to take up your time, I'm sorry to coach you. You might have just booked yourself live a new client. We'll see, because that was, it's funny. I know we're over time, but I am in those shoes. And again, I'm going to be super vulnerable. And for all the listeners, I love Forever Forward. Like, I want this to be my life. But at times, I do view this as an escape from everything else.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like I need it to happen right now. And the months where it's not happening right now, be it downloads on Spotify or views or subscribers, it does make me resent this whole experience. And you are literally preaching to the choir. I felt this before. And I only feel that because I love this so much that I want it to happen now, but I also feel it because I do want to escape certain parts of my life. And I think in the effort to try and escape, I might be neglecting my life. And I'm trying to anchor myself to the story of like, this is who I became because I made these sacrifices and I worked the hours and I had this chip on my shoulder, and like, I haven't had it pitched to me in this way before, Adam. So I really do appreciate it.
What's the most successful podcast in the world?
Well, Joe Rogan.
Yeah. And his whole thing is like, I was just doing this for fun.
Yeah.
So I think what happens is, and I especially see it because like I am the same. I'm cut from the same cloth as you. And one thing a therapist told me that I think would be very helpful for you too is that people think that like, oh, I'm anxious, I have anxiety about this one thing, right?
Yep.
So anxiety is like a rising water level, and you're like a dam, and the anxiety is coming through the crack of your career. That's where you have like the most anxiety, right? But what happens is when you patch up that crack, it's going to come to a different crack. So then you might start obsessing about your relationship or your health or whatever it is. So the goal isn't to patch up the crack. The goal is to lower the water level. So you have to work on daily practices to reduce your baseline anxiety. And that's where like the breath work and the meditation and the workouts and the journaling and actually not working helps. And like July, like again, dude, I'm not a millionaire or anything, and not even close, but like I'm making decent money doing something that I love. And this July, like last year, was a down year for my business, and it was one of the most stressful years of my fucking life.
Yep.
But this year, like this July, there were some days I feel like I really didn't work that much this month, and I had a good month. And again, it's not because of magic. It's just because I was focusing on showing up in a more positive light. in 2023, 2022, when I was showing up on calls and running seminars from a place of like, this has to work because I'm so stressed out. People could feel that. And I
Yeah,
don't feel that from you at all, but I'm just saying it's something that I've literally put the best things in my life in negative places because I was trying to fix this thing. Like I would tell the story of, no, you don't understand. I'm trying to get my business to here so that I can focus, so I can provide for my wife and for my kids. And I'm doing this for them. But all they want is for me to be present at home and hang out with them and
totally.
watch some trash reality TV on the weekends and get to go get ice cream and play baseball with my son for 3 hours. Like that's what they want. They don't give a shit. So like I was just telling myself this story, and then that got me to a place where I was like, I I just felt like I was disconnected from the people that I love most, which at the time was my wife and my son. Now it's my wife, my son, my daughter. But I was like if I wasn't working, I just felt anxious, and I would just be like, I should be working right now. I should be working right now. And it just took me out. There was a lot of moments in my life that I mentally just wasn't present for, that was because I was so stressed and focused on work, and it was stupid.
And I
And
and
yeah,
I feel like, just to circle back quick and maybe even close on it, if you can approach it with that mindset, right, versus the mindset that it needs to happen now or it needs to happen today because I need to justify my stress, I need to justify my story, maybe the passion project, the business is actually better for it.
100%
Maybe,
way.
right? Maybe, I hope, because right now I'm pretty damn stressed, right? And if I can
Yeah.
reorient the framework, maybe this thing can even be even better.
Yeah, 100% it would, man. And also too is this like, then you, and I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying you in general, like people
Right.
in general, but not, I was this person. You become the dude who's literally just showing up, telling their like bearing their cross, and everyone else is just like, well, yeah, but you're like for me, it was like, yeah, but you're choosing to be the provider and have your own business. You could not do that. So like, why are you fucking complaining about it all the
Right,
time,
right, right.
right? And so like for you, it's like when you feel yourself getting into that space, focus on, oh, like this is a good thing. Like this is a fun thing. This doesn't like this isn't like, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you want to, you can just tell, like it'll show up differently in the content you put out, in the, if you do emails or if you do videos or whatever. Like when you show up on shows, if you're showing up from a place of, listen, guest,
Totally.
you're part of, you're something that's going to help get me out of this place. And then if the interview isn't that great, you're going to be like, what the fuck did I waste this hour for? Like I
100%.
like, yeah, yeah. And then but again, people can kind of feel that. But if, I've had people on my podcast who were like, literally, they were like, I've never even been on a podcast before. Like, I don't even know what to say. I was like, yeah, it's fine. This will be cool. Like, you sent me over show notes. Like, I've not done show notes, but
Yeah.
I'm just like, again, I'm not saying to do it my way because my podcast isn't super successful, but like, I don't know, man. I just think that if you can calm your mind and focus on operating from a space of like, as corny as it sounds, like abundance and like, hey, this is all going to turn out. This is the journey. Um, it can really help in the way you show up. But the thing is though, is just like, it doesn't just, you can't just flip a switch and you feel like that all the time. All these hardwired negative emotions are going to keep coming in, and you have to have processes and tactics to help reroute them. Speaking of which, my wife's sitting in the hot sun and waiting for me to be done, so I probably have to
well,
bounce.
look, man. I think you might have just booked yourself a new client, and I can't appreciate you enough. And to anybody listening, it's Adam Badger, Badger Strength on Instagram. And thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it.